Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Tom Met Show. Thank you so much, Sandy, for bringing us in and doing the thing, and our staff for doing all that they do. Mitch Anderson and Vanessa, thank you guys so much for all the things you do to support us and all the hard work that you do behind the scenes. Last week, Jeff Turner was here for his first visit. Jeff Turner's an amazing guy who has so many good programs for your fitness. You want to check him out. Check out that episode. Check out Jeff Turner. He's all over the place on social media, and he's got a very legitimate program, especially for growing older adults. So take it from me. He's super solid. I don't put fitness people on this radio program without, checking them out, making sure they're all good for you guys. So that's it. Speaking of a good guy, I got one of my buddies here. We got to be pals over the last couple of years here. And I'm a huge fan of Mr. Robert Bryce, Texas-based author, journalist, and just basically a bad mofo. Podcast and film producer, public speaker. Over the past 3 decades, he's done it all. He's done it all. Spoke in Congress. The only thing I don't think he's done is he spoke like in Antarctica or the North Pole. Other than that, the guy speaks everywhere on every topic when it comes to energy. We could go into all of his bio, but we got so much we want to talk about here. Check out some of the previous episodes. Check out Robert Bryce. We'll get you all his info here shortly. But we're going to talk about Spain drain, calling this one Spain drain. I want to welcome back to the radio program my bird watching buddy, Robert, the man.
Hey, Mr. Matt, good to be with you.
Thank you, bro. Good. Thank you. So, you've been here before. This is your life. Kind of do your thing and catch us up on the family and all that and talk about your bird watching, please.
Well, sure. Where to begin? Life is good. Gave my name, Robert Bryce. I'm a reporter. I'm a author, journalist, public speaker, film producer. I'm incredibly fortunate in my life, my career. Married to the same beautiful woman, 39 years. Got 3 great kids. I write about energy, talk about energy and power, and that's my gig.
That's his gig, and he is the man. And he talks about it, and so. As I said on the intro here, everybody, Spain drain. Okay. I mean, there's so much to talk about. We have discussed this thing with all of it. Robert, I'm just going to let you illuminate and illustrate and educate all of those people, all those 8 words, and help people understand why this is a precursor to the future. Or maybe it isn't, but I don't, that's why you're here. Go ahead. Please talk about this situation that was recently, when this show airs, it'll be about a month, but the big blackout in Europe and Spain and Portugal. Go right ahead, please.
Sure. Well, April 28th was a Monday about midday. 55 million people in Spain and Portugal lost power. And now power since was restored within a day or two, but there's been a lot of finger pointing about what caused this, and it is, I think, very obvious now in looking in the rearview mirror, looking at where it happened, why, and the timing, that Spain's overdependence on alternative energy, and in particular on solar, was a key contributing factor to the blackouts, to this blackout. And now, of course, that set off a challenge of people saying, "Oh, well, no, you can't. You're just anti-renewable. I'm speaking broadly, not just me." Because I've written a couple of pieces saying, yes, we can blame solar for this. And the reasons are obvious, including the fact that Red Electrica, which is the grid operator in Spain, had warned in February that, in fact, it was very concerned about an over-reliance on solar, and it was causing the destabilization of the grid in Spain, and numerous other reasons that have emerged since then that point to solar as a probable cause, and over-reliance on solar for the destabilization of the grid and the blackout. So this is a critical issue now. It's all in the news. And why is, I'll just end with this, and that's the brief introduction, but why has there been so much effort to put the blame somewhere else? Like, oh, don't blame renewables. Well, because there's tens of billions of dollars at stake here. Massive government subsidies, massive amounts of money to be made by big business, big law firms, big NGOs, and big business, that's at stake here, and in Spain, and of course around the world, where there's a lot of the big banks. I think I said big banks, big companies, big law firms, big NGOs. This is what this is where they're going to make their money. So they don't want this cash flow to stop. And so that now is going to be the case where, the Spanish government saying, oh, full investigation, full investigation. I think it's clear they know what happened, but they don't want to talk about it because it's embarrassing.
Oh, absolutely. 100% embarrassing. And it's, we talk about all the time. It's like, follow the money, everybody, follow the money, because that's what it's all about. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's true. All right. So there are reasons why, and I'm not a physics person. I'm not a power expert, but when Robert Bryce is on the show and he talks about destabilizations, and let's kind of set it up, Robert, for the rest of the program. But the
Sure.
way the grid's set up, and you have this physics issue. It's a
Yeah.
physics issue. People need to understand that there's actually a physics issue with networks. And I know networks from my low voltage experience in my career. So networks are very, very, very critical. And that's the whole point of this episode today. But talk about the physics and the destabilizations and why people need to understand this is what happened.
Sure. So let's talk about let's assume you've got a swimming pool in your backyard or a hot tub, or maybe you just had taken a bath. So you turn on the water and the water pressure drops because maybe your neighbor is filling their swimming pool or doing something else, running their lawn sprinklers. So the water pressure and therefore the water flow into your bathtub or your hot tub, whatever, drops a little bit. Well, it's not the end of the day, not the end of the world for you, because it means you're just going to have to spend a few more minutes waiting for it to fill up. The water analogy applies to electricity with this key exception, and that is that on the electric grid, you cannot allow that water pressure, to mix the metaphor here, to drop. It has to stay constant. The flow rate and the pressure has to stay constant on the electric grid. And if it varies too much, the system shuts down to protect itself. So that's the key, and that's the key difference. And engineers even use water as a way to think about the grid and how it works. But it's appropriate here because what we saw in Spain was that apparently there was a big drop in voltage and/or frequency around 12:33 local time on April 28th, and that resulted in a massive drop off in systems shutting down, and the system disconnecting from the French grid, which is important as well because France, of course, relies heavily on nuclear, and the French grid was important for Spain to get its grid back up and running. But that was the key, that you had too many the grid in Spain became destabilized for reasons now the Spanish government doesn't want to talk about, but it's clear that this heavy reliance on renewables at the time of the failure, there were 60-70% of the electricity was coming from wind or solar, and now the grid collapsed, and now everyone's rushing around saying, "Oh, don't blame wind and solar." Well, I'm happy to say they're a key cause.
I've got something I want to say on this whole topic with everybody, but we're coming up on break here, so I'm going to reset this thing, and I'm going to come back to it when we come back in the second segment. Let me reset all this. Robert Bryce is here. This is a very, very important topic, everybody. Calling this one Spain drain because of the situation that happened in Spain and Portugal recently with their power outage. Okay. What I'm going to talk to Robert about and kind of bring up here in a second was like a week before I read this in the Wall Street Journal that Spain and Portugal, they were so excited about telling everybody, oh, we're 100%, they're bragging. Here's a tip, everybody. When you start crowing, you sometimes have to eat crow. Okay. When you start talking, you're going to get some smash talk back. And this is basically what happened. One of my previous guests talk about smashing, there's a rugby guy talking about smash. They got smashed. They got smashed by the weather. Okay. Or whatever. We're going to talk about these things because again, we'll come back and we'll talk to Robert about this. This is all propaganda. This is all propaganda. And this is why we got to bring Robert in here to talk about what in the heck's going on so you guys get the straight story. All right. So Spain drain, Robert Bryce, Tom Matt Show. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you, Sandy, for bringing us back. This segment of the Tom Matt Show is sponsored by our guy, Craig Stiles, Ameriprise Financial, handling all of our retirement zone savings money. Thank God. And, it's doing what it's doing. Okay. With the right financial advisor, life can be brilliant. Reach out to a Craig Stiles or Ameriprise Financial. Call this number, 1-800-528-1355. His local number is 517-483-4893, or craig.stiles@ampf.com is his email. Offices are located 2651 Coolidge Road, Suite 103, East Lansing, Michigan, 48823. There you go. Please reach out. Don't be afraid if you are listening to this show somewhere in the Midwest on the broadcast or on the podcast and you're all over the place, or we have people listening to the show everywhere in the whole world. Ameriprise is a big, big, big company. Craig will vet all of the agents for you if you want. So then you can have one-stop shopping. Plus, remember that Craig is our Reality of Real Estate and our Financial Fitness. Those are both of our sponsors. Financial Fitness, Craig, Reality of Real Estate with Brock. And so those are two things where you really want to keep an eye on things. Stations that have carried us in the past. Carry us now, WGHN 92.1 FM in Grand Haven, WJM 1240 AM in Lansing, Michigan is the flagship of the Michigan Talk Network, where we're syndicated all over the Midwest. WJRW 1340 in Grand Rapids, WKLQ 1490 Muskegon Whitehall, WIPV FM 94.5 up north in Mackinac City on the Michigan Talk Network, and of course our PBS affiliate at Michigan State University in East Lansing, WKAR AM 870 East Lansing, and simulcast at 102.3 FM, Sundays at 5. Sundays at 5. Thank you again to Craig Stiles for creating Desideri Analytics, where we are making light of weighted decisions. And last, I want to say thanks to Steve and Ivy Gruber, the owners of the Michigan Talk Network, for carrying us all these years. It's just so, so grateful to them. And of course, second lastly thing, remember we have these books on this thing called Amazon. It's out there. Go check them out. They're good. They're solid. All right, back to our show today with my buddy, Robert Bryce. So glad to get Robert in. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Robert. I appreciate you so much. This is such an important topic for people to understand, that the grid stability, network stability, and everything that we do. Think of it this way, everybody. Your network, you have networks everywhere. You have RFID chips on clothing. You have your Wi-Fi network in your house. You have networks everywhere. If the network breaks down, what happens? All right. So let's get back to Robert and find out what happened and how can we start to become educated about all this. Robert, sorry it took so long, but go ahead. I'll let you have the rest of the segment to kind of help us understand all of this, the balance of power.
Well, where to start? Let me just talk first about, you're in Michigan, and my wife, Lauren, is born and raised or was raised in Ann Arbor. Father taught her at U of M. So I've been in Michigan many times. What is happening in Spain, in addition to this discussion around solar and wind and alt energy in Spain, the same issues are affecting the Spanish countryside as what you're seeing in rural Michigan. That is, local people looking at all these solar and wind projects and saying, we don't want them here. Take these projects, put them where the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow. We don't want them here. And so you've seen in Spain, and I wrote about this on my Substack just on May 2nd, about this backlash across Spain, and it's happening in multiple provinces, in Galicia, in Andalusia, where local people, in particular farmers, are fighting back against the encroachment of large-scale solar projects. So I found an article, it was in El País, Spain's national newspaper, of a big protest of farmers in Jaén, which is considered the olive oil capital of the world. There's the photos of tractors and farmers standing there, and they're holding a sign. The protesters are saying, and on the sign it says, I translated in English, in defense of olive trees and our livelihood, ! We don't want solar plants. Green Alia out of our territory now. Green Alia is the company pushing this. So this is of a piece, Tom, with what I've seen and reported on now for going on 15 years, that people all over the world, everyone everywhere cares about what happens in their neighborhoods. And the fundamental problem, in addition to the intermittency issue with wind and solar, is that they take up too much land. And local people don't want these, in rural areas, don't want these projects in their neighborhoods. And this is, they're all concerned about the same things: the property values, the farmland, preservation of ag land. That was what I found in Ida Township there in Michigan when I was there a couple of years ago. In fact, it was 24 months ago. The themes are all the same. And so this issue of the grid in Spain is only one aspect of the problems that are inherent in wind and solar deployment and batteries as well.
There you go. I mean, it's one of these things, everybody, where we have too much land. Let me tell you, it's a quick one. When we drive over to our home in Wisconsin, we go up to northeast Wisconsin, where our second home is. There is a massive windmill farm in northeast Wisconsin on our way up 41 up towards Green Bay. Okay, it's a huge facility. I mean, it's massive. It's cool to look at, and I mean, if you've ever seen the big wind spots down in Texas or New Mexico or wherever we saw, I mean, it's pretty impressive, but they are massive. I mean, Robert, not even talking about the land, but what happens in 15 years, 10 years, because they probably say life expectancy is 25 years or 30, which they never are. What are you going to do with all of these broken parts? I mean, how do we recycle all this stuff?
Well, largely you don't. These turbine blades are massive. They're made out of these very hard and materials, including fiberglass, and they aren't being recycled. In many cases, they're just being put into the landfill. And so that's the end of life question. The life cycle analysis of these projects, that's a very important thing to discuss. But let me bring up something else. And this is something we talked about just before we started on our conversation recording. I'm a lifelong bird watcher. I went birding the other day here just outside of Austin, saw orchard orioles, saw the golden cheek warbler, which is a species endemic to this part of Texas, only breeds in this part of Texas and then goes back to Central America. It was a remarkable day. Painted buntings. These are iconic birds. And the thing that just absolutely grills my cheese, to quote my late brother John Bryce, was that these big wind turbines, they kill birds and bats at enormous rates. And, I'm sorry, these people who are in favor of wind energy, oh, well, cats kill birds too. Okay, they don't kill golden eagles. They don't kill bald eagles. Wind turbines do. What about bats? Bats are important pollinators and insectivores. They kill bats, and bats are very slow. They're very slow to reproduce. The only flying mammals. The impact that these wind turbines are having, these wind projects are having on birds and bats has been documented, but the industry just gets a pass because, it's alternative energy. Oh, it's clean energy. Those are marketing terms, Tom. And, it just, I find it just completely outrageous. And that these so-called environmental NGOs have just completely sold out. They've sold out to these big wind projects, these owners of these big projects, because they're getting donations from them in many cases. And it's a betrayal of the first order. And I haven't even mentioned offshore wind energy and the impact on North Atlantic right whales. So, I mean, I just find the entirety of this whole scheme is it's outrageous from top to bottom.
Okay. Perfect jumping off point there. We're going there. We're going to talk about this offshore stuff. This is the whole thing. We're going to talk about nuclear. We're going to talk about all of this stuff, the balance of power, the birds, the environmental issues, all of these things we don't hear about, but you are here because you hear the straight story with my buddy, Robert Bryce. This is the Tom Mann Show. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you, Sandy, for bringing us back. This segment is sponsored by my very, very good friend, Brock Fletcher, Keller Williams Realty, where his middle name is Trust. And you guys have heard me tell the story. I'm going to tell it again. I had Mikey next door, our former neighbor here at Little House Lansing. Okay. We'd known him for a couple of years, young couple, just had a baby. And he comes over to me to get some advice. Cause people come to me all the time for advice. And I'm like, okay, cool. And he tells me his whole story. And the thing is I thought his number was low, but I don't know real estate. So I said, you should give my buddy a call, Brock Fletcher. Call him 517-853-6408 or 517-303-3262. Because I think you're selling yourself a little short here. And Brock came in. I had no idea. Brock was going to get the listing. I just told him, hey, make a phone call. He'll help you. Brock got the listing. A week later, boom, sold the house, $20,000 over market, over what he thought he was going to get, $20,000. And he just had a baby. This is the way these guys work. You want to work with the selling team of Keller Williams Realty. Their middle name is Trust. Brock Fletcher is a stud. He's a star. And so is Mike Dedman. They're all, the whole team over there is awesome. Okay. Most agents start marketing after you list with them. Brock is marketing long before he meets the potential seller. That's what he did with us with Big House Holt. Keep these guys in mind. Plus, remember, reality of real estate, that's his gig. And there's like 20 episodes on this website, on our website. However you want to listen to it, you want to watch them, go for it. And I'm sure there's questions there. It doesn't cost you a dime. All right. Back to our show today with my buddy, joining us from Austin, Texas, RB, Robert Bryce. If you haven't followed RB, if you haven't got on his newsletter, if you haven't got on his LinkedIn, if you haven't got on his social media, what are you doing? I mean, you're missing out on some really good stuff here. And I'm telling you, I read his articles all the time. I see his videos all the time. He's very, very active talking about this topic with Spain and calling this episode Spain Drain. Okay, so we're kind of whittling our way through this whole mess because in my note that I wrote from the previous segment, Robert, the marketing of green energy, that's what I wrote. I want to just give that to you because that's what's happening here. We're getting all of this bull crap, and it's like, that's what the problem is. Go right ahead, please.
Well, it is marketing, and that's one of the reasons why I don't. When I talk about wind and solar, I say wind energy, solar energy. I call them alt energy, alternative energy, renewable, clean, green. These are all marketing terms. Those are the promoters' terms. And as my friend Jesse Osabel has said many times, solar and wind may be renewable, but they are not green. And I think that captures that just perfectly. And why is that true? Why they may be renewable, but they are not green? Well, one of the biggest reasons is that they require this massive footprint. They require enormous amounts of land. And therefore, as I talked about in our previous segment, this is resulting in land use conflicts all over the world. You mentioned my Substack, robertbryce.substack.com. That's where I do almost all my writing. I have also been cataloging on my website, robertbryce.com, in the renewable rejection database, all of the rejections that are happening across the United States of wind and solar. And I've started collecting data on batteries, but I've documented now in the United States more than 800 rejections or restrictions of wind energy, and it's from Maine to Hawaii. Local people, as I said, everyone everywhere cares about what happens in their neighborhoods. And these landscape destroying, view shed destroying, property value decreasing projects of wind and solar, local people are just saying, we don't want these, and put them somewhere else. And that's what we're seeing in Spain. Now, if I can jump to one other thing, we talked about nuclear briefly, and this is the other part of the issues that are now facing Spain. And it's what I wrote about on May 2nd on my Substack, where the headline was, yes, we can blame solar for Spain's blackout. And if the socialist government doesn't change course, expect more blackouts. Well, what is the socialist government there headed by Pedro Sanchez? They're saying they're going to close all of Spain's nuclear plants by 2035. Tom, Matt, that's 20% of all the power generation in Spain. So they're seeing they've just had a blackout, and yet despite this, and despite the problems, despite the objections in rural Spain against these solar and wind projects, they're saying, oh, we're going to close our nuclear plants. Well, it's clear then if they aren't serious about climate change, they're just anti-nuclear and pro-renewable. They're not. If they were serious about CO2 emissions, they would be keeping those nuclear plants open. But the pending closure of these nuclear plants makes this situation yet more precarious, because that means even more power will have to come from alt energy than what they're getting now, and that will further fragilize the Spanish grid. So it's just a big stinking mess. I was going to use a different modifier there. A big stinking, foul-smelling mess.
And it's all about money. It's not about the people. It's not about the citizens.
It's not about the climate. Not about the climate.
Exactly, Robert, right? It's not about the climate. This alt energy thing, it's all about the climate. No, it's not about the climate. It's about the money. The money. I want to ask you a question because you just brought up the nuclear thing. And I've read a lot about these new small nuclear plants. And I know you know a lot about these. And I know, is it true that they're kind of like a manufactured, very small, very easy, very tight? Are those coming? Are those actually a real thing, Robert?
Well, yes and no. There is a lot of a lot of focus on that, a lot of hype around that. Frankly, hype, I think, is the right word. But let's be sober again about what's going on. And, people say I'm skeptical. Well, yeah, I am skeptical. It's like that, that old BB King line, nobody loves me but my mother, and she could be jiving too. Well, she could be jiving. Go ask your dad. Does she really love you? Well, maybe, I don't know. So small modular reactors, there's a lot of promise there, but let's be clear about where they are. There are no nuclear reactors, no licensed nuclear reactor designs under construction now in the United States. Now, some reactor projects have construction licenses. There's some projects that are moving dirt and they're pouring concrete in the hope that they're going to get a license. But the reality is there are no reactors, licensed reactors that are underway here in the United States today, which is truly remarkable given that we produce more power from nuclear power plants than any other country in the world. So SMRs, yes, they have a lot of potential, and I've been talking about them for a long time, but I'm also very skeptical about their ability to make a significant contribution to the U.S. electric grid in anything like the near term, and by that I mean the next 10 to 15 years. And why is that? Because the federal government has to solve the regulation issue, they have to solve the capital problem, the fuel problem, and the waste problem. They have to do it all at once. And I fear that, the Trump administration, they're doing some things that are right on the energy front, but they're screwing up a lot of other things and taking, I think, a lot of political opportunity. They're wasting a lot of political capital with, I think, some of this, these things around tariffs and some of this other stuff that if they were more judicious, they could focus their attention better. And the thing that I would want them to focus on is nuclear energy. But that's a long discussion. But yes, SMRs, there's a lot of potential there, but we just have to build and we have to get on with it. And we're not really building anything at scale.
Okay. So much there. Coming up on break here in a second. So I'm going to carry this thing through. Robert Bryce here. Robert's going to take a little break here because he just gave us a nice little 8-minute little talk there, talking about Spain drain, and we're talking about energy. That's what Robert's here for. Robert Bryce is the energy expert of all time. I mean, he's the guy. He's a Texas-based author, journalist, podcaster, film producer, public speaker. Matter of fact, he's doing a speech for one of his buddies this afternoon for some college kids. 3 decades. His articles have appeared in numerous publications, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. I mean, the guy's been all over the place. And when I found Robert, the story back behind the story was I found his Enron book. And this was at like a secondhand store or something. And it was brand new. And I saw this nice, really, really nice book. And I bought this book. I read that it was so fascinating. If you go back and you start looking at that Enron book, which was what, 2000 or something, we can talk about that maybe a little bit. But these same things have been occurring. This is the same. I almost swore there. This has been occurring over and over and over and over, and we got to get ahead of it. Robert Bryce is here. Spain drain. This is the Tom Mann Show. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the radio program, podcast, whatever you're listening to, and however you're picking us up. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all so much. And, the YouTube thing's been going really, really well, and it's just a slow grind. I mean, we just got to stay consistent and keep moving. I mean, that's the whole thing. Go to our website, tommattshow.com, and you can find all of our shows. Robert Bryce is our guest today. Robert Bryce he's the man. I mean, when it comes to energy and power, he's the man. And we've gotten to be good friends, and he's just a good guy to talk to. He's a pro, so he's easy to interview because these topics are so hot. But before we get back into the hot topics, how do we connect with Robert? He just talked about his Substack. You guys absolutely want to get on that Substack. If you don't get on a Substack, you're missing out. And it's not that much. Robert, please plug.
Plug my own work. Well, robertbryce.substack.com. I've done 2 documentaries, juicethemovie.com, juicetheseries.com. Our latest project is the series Juice, Power, Politics, and the Grid. 5-part docuseries. Each episode's about 20 minutes. Really proud of that. My colleague Tyson Culver did a great job. We deal with land use conflicts. I've been talking about land use conflicts, particularly in Oklahoma, is where we focus a lot of our work because I'm proud native of Oklahoma. And we have the third segment is largely focused on the Osage tribe in Oklahoma and their years-long fight against Enel, the Italian company, which put wind turbines on there in Osage County, Oklahoma, and and in doing so violated the tribe's sovereignty. So, yeah, I'm very lucky to do what I do, Tom. This is my purpose and my passion, my business, what I do, and writing and talking about energy and power and talking to people like you. I'm a very lucky man.
Oh, it's a fun time to do this kind of stuff and talking to Robert and trying to educate everybody, because we get so much bull crap out there with marketing. I just talked about that in the previous segment, marketing of green energy, or alt energy, as Robert calls it, the marketing and getting through all of the clutter and what's happening with these things. I wrote a note here, and I wanted to bring up the word inertia. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to revisit this again because we're talking specifically a lot about the Spain drain thing. Robert, in case people just joined us, and I didn't mention the word inertia on the previous segments, but talk about that term and why you need to understand that, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, so, it was Isaac Newton, the law of motion, an object in motion tends to stay in motion, object at rest tends to stay at rest. So that's how you think about inertia. A car that's going to be, goes 100 miles an hour, it's going to take a while for it to stop unless you apply brakes to it or it runs into something, right? The same applies to the grid, and the idea of the electricity moving in the grid has momentum behind it. Yeah, electrons, you think, well, they don't weigh anything. Well, okay, yes, but to move those electrons requires force. And that inertia, that force, that, as I talked about before, that water pressure or rate of flow of electrons has to stay at a constant rate. Well, and in the US, it's 60 hertz. In Spain and in Australia and other parts of the world, it's 50 hertz. But nevertheless, to keep all that electricity flowing, to keep that pressure of the electrons moving, it has now, since the days of Edison, relied on big spinning machines, right? So in Edison's day, it was these, he had a relatively small group of coal-fired generators. We still use coal, and they run these big turbines, and these turbines weigh they have a lot of mass, and they start spinning, and those things spin, and they want to continue spinning. But that inertia of that spinning mass is critical to maintaining the pressure and the flow on the grid. And the problem with solar and wind is what they're called inverter-based resources. They don't have any inertia. They don't add any pressure, to use the water comparison, to the grid. So that they have to be compensated in some way. Then there's something called, you can create what's called synthetic inertia. One idea is that you use a big flywheel to make it all work, right? And so you imagine you have a heavy flywheel, it's spinning that ability of that heavy mass to ride through any changes or variations in flow or frequency. That has been key, and that has been what the grid has used for decades now, well, really since Edison. But now we're seeing this influx of these asynchronous generation or inverter-based resources, and they are undermining the stability of the grid because they don't contribute to the stability, if that makes sense.
I got a question for you, because you're talking about this. Robert Bryce, our guest today, everybody. We talk energy with Robert all the time. Spain drain. When you guys, a few years ago, you had that big winter blackout.
Yeah.
This was a similar situation, correct? I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up is, like, people need to be aware that these natural events may occur. And so we got to get ourselves ready here. Talk about that situation. What happened in Texas? Isn't this similar to this situation in Spain and Portugal?
Well, a couple of quick thoughts. One is that in Texas during Winter Storm Uri, now it's 4 years ago, we had a protracted blackout, or a protracted period of cold weather. It stayed here in Austin, and I'm pretty far south here in the U.S. It stayed below freezing for 6 days in a row. Well, I've lived in Austin for 40 years, and we've never seen anything like that. So when it gets that cold, the whole system gets stressed. And was there one cause of the blackout that across the state? No, there were multiple causes. Yes, we lost a lot of natural gas production. Why? Because some of the power plants were dependent on natural gas, and the power to some of the pumping stations for the natural gas plants they had their power cut off. So, multiple mistakes were made. But one of the points that I make is, the state, everybody brags about, oh, there's so much wind and solar in Texas. Yeah, that's fine. But when the chips were down and the Texas grid was on the verge of collapse, and it came very close to collapsing, and if it had, what calamity would have ensued. Wind and solar were gone. They were nowhere to be found. They went to Cancun with Ted Cruz. They were gone, right? The sun wasn't shining, the wind wasn't blowing, and they were contributing nothing when the grid was on the precipice. So therein lies the what's the moral of the story? You cannot rely on these weather dependent inverter based resources to come to the rescue of the grid. You have to have spinning mass. You have to have traditional generation to make sure the system doesn't fall apart. Now, could batteries potentially step in? I'm coming around to the utility of batteries. It's taken me a while, but yes, batteries, maybe they could have changed the situation in Spain. We're putting a hell of a lot of batteries in place here in Texas and they can add to this voltage and frequency issue. So, I'm willing to be convinced, but the bottom line here, Tom, is that a couple of things. One is we take the availability of electricity and we assume the robustness and resilience of the electric grid. We just assume that and ignore it at our extreme peril. I mean, if we ignore this system, which is the mother network, the system upon which all of our modern systems depend, we could be in for a very, very rude awakening. So that's one takeaway. And second, we're at this point now where we're looking at a future where everyone's saying, oh, electricity demand is going to grow and we need to add more wind and solar, all this other stuff. Well, yeah, perhaps, but we have to be very, very sober about how this is rolling out and who it's going to affect and the affordability, resilience, and reliability of electricity, because that should be the foremost focus of policymakers: affordability, reliability, and resilience.
There was a line I have, and I'm going to run out of time here, but I'm going to bring it up right now, and then we'll come back and we'll revisit this in the final segment, everybody. I heard this marketing kind of excuse, atmospheric issues.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Talk about that for a sec, Robert. Atmospheric issues.
Sure. Well, this was the first line that came out, on that Monday, April 28th, that when the blackout occurred, was, oh, well, what happened? Oh, and so the Spanish authorities say there was some anomalous atmospheric issue or something, like, like there was a solar flare or something. And now, to be clear, if you have some solar storm, that can affect electronics here in the U.S. I mean, there's just no question about it. And there's a long and expansive literature on that about electromagnetic pulses and what effect they can have. They haven't brought it up since then, right? That's kind of disappeared from the discourse, right? There's been no real discussion of it. But what is clear, and I want to make sure that I point this out before I get to before we conclude, which is that Red Electrica, which is a publicly traded company in Spain, in February warned about here, I'll read the key parts from their annual report. They said there was a short-term risk of generation disconnections due to the high penetration of renewables, and that the loss of power, the company said, could damage their reputation. But here's the other, this is the key part. It said I'm reading it, a high penetration of renewable generation without the necessary technical capabilities in place to keep them operating properly in the event of a disturbance can cause power generation outages, which could be severe.
We're going to go to break, and I want to come back and we're going to revisit that point exactly when we come back after Robert's contact info, because that is the key point. Have Robert read that again for us, and then we're going to talk about hydrocarbons. You're listening to the Tom Matt Show. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for listening, following us, viewing. However, it's kind of crazy. We did radio we still do radio, but we did radio for so long exclusively that I sometimes forget about the video stuff. And it's like the video stuff's becoming more and more of a big deal. Robert Bryce, I guess today, Robert deals very exclusively, very, very much exclusively with power issues, which is a huge topic. I mean, we've been all over the place, but basically the conversation has been revolving around Spain drain, was what we would call this one, and the blackout that happened in Europe recently. Robert was just reading a little passage that, in case we have some new listeners that came in, I think this is very, very important to talk about before we talk about hydrocarbons and where we're going with all of that. But that key point you were just discussing, Robert, would you please kind of set that up again and then go ahead and do that read?
Well, sure. I mean, the point is that the grid operator in Spain, in just Red Electrica, 2 months. I mean, this is not ancient history. Just 2 months before the blackout, warned of this exact kind of thing happening. It was saying that the high penetration of renewable generation without technical capabilities in place to keep them operating in the event of a disturbance can cause power generation outages, which could be severe. Well, a total blackout is a pretty severe outage. And so, just look at what they were saying. And there was one other really good analysis that came out on April 29th, on that Tuesday, by Rystad Energy. And it was one of the best quick analyses I'd seen. And the key part there, I'll read this part. High solar generation also contributed to initial grid fluctuations, as solar accounted for around 29% of Spain's total generation at the time of the event, making the system more sensitive to voltage instability. France's nuclear fleet, however, provided steady baseload generation throughout the event, giving it the ability to respond swiftly once interconnectors were re-engaged. So, super stable, baseload, reliable, zero carbon nuclear versus the intermittent, zero inertia, weather dependent solar generation in Spain. And here's Rystad, an independent analysis the day after. They call it right out. I mean, it's really very clear.
It's just that's the whole thing. We know this is going to occur. So it's like saying that, hey, we're going to talk about hydrocarbons here in a second, but gas prices are going up because we're going to have a weather thing. We're having a hurricane in a month. I mean, so they set this marketing stuff up and then it actually happens. But nobody pays attention to it. It's I was going to say annoying. I find it to be mind boggling. Before we jump into the hydrocarbons, I'm sorry, what, Robert?
Yes, go ahead. No,
before we jump into the hydrocarbon stuff, I wanted to ask you about, because I saw a post on LinkedIn on data centers.
Yeah.
And what's going to be happening with all of that? How are they planning? This stuff it's booming. It's booming like mad.
Yeah.
And it's only going to ramp up. So our electrical network needs to be way, way more robust. It's going to take years and years to do this. Let's talk about the data center situation, what we got going there. Do our young people want to go into this business, or what do you think?
Sure. So data centers, AI, artificial intelligence, everyone's talking about this now. And there's been a tremendous amount of focus on the availability of enough electricity to power all these new data centers and AI systems. And the projections for the growth in power demand are just astonishing. Now, just a quick review. So since 2000, U.S. electricity demand has only been growing by less than 1% a year. S&P Global is now projecting that we could see, a near doubling by 2040, 2050. I mean, these are just enormous numbers. In fact, I'm going to Orlando tomorrow to present on this and talking about this very issue, among other things. Let me just pull that up because I have it here at hand. Yeah, I'm sorry, I said double. That the power demand would increase by 55% by 2040. So not a doubling, but a 50% increase in what is that, 15 years? I mean, this is an enormous increase. And from where will we get this power? I mean, and so when I look at it, you see big tech, Amazon, Google, the rest of them, Meta. 2 years ago, it was all solar, all wind, blah, blah, blah. Well, now what are they doing? They're saying we need more natural gas and we need power plants that run on gas because we know we can build them. So, and nuclear, yes, there's some of these projects, they are aiming to use nuclear, including at 3 Mile Island and perhaps at Susquehanna in Pennsylvania. But those are a long way away. And so, what is going to power the grid? What is the U.S. electric grid going to rely on in the near term, even more heavily than it is already? Natural gas. And big tech in particular is going to be relying on natural gas.
That brings us right. Perfect segue. Hydrocarbons, natural gas, coal, oil. Okay. When China's building, I don't even know, hundreds of plants a year of coal plants and telling us not to burn coal anymore. And we have all of this great coal technology. Robert, that's a question for you. It just kind of popped into my head, but the new technologies with clean coal, is that true that there are better technologies now than, say, what China does with burning coal?
Well, sure. So what's happening in the coal sector, you have 3 types of power plants: subcritical, supercritical, ultra supercritical. Ultra supercritical because it's got a lot more syllables in it. That's the highest efficiency power plant. And so you wring more electricity out of each kilogram of coal or pound of coal that you put into the power plant. That's what they're building in Japan. In fact, Japan is building coal-fired power plants, and I was there 2 years ago, and I think they've come online. So Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO, the same company that owned Fukushima, is building coal-fired power plants in Japan. That's the reality. The step back from that issue around, I'll come back to clean coal in just a second, but the thing that I see now, in particular, given this enormous amount of new potential demand in the United States for electricity, is why aren't we using more of our own coal? Instead, we're shuttering our coal plants. And that is true, even though the U.S. is not just, just a major coal. Our coal resources are not just big, they're enormous. We're the Saudi Arabia of coal. We have more coal resources than any other country in the world by far, and yet we're not using it, and to the extent that we could. And as you point out, China is building right now 200 gigawatts of new coal plants. So for perspective, Tom, that just what they're building now is larger than the entire installed base of coal plants in the United States. So, the scale of what is happening in China, and we can talk about India, Vietnam, other countries where they're building more coal plants as well, but China is the story. And so, this idea we're going to control global temperatures by decarbonizing the United States is a fiction. The reality is that unless or until India and China change their trajectory, particularly around coal-fired power, CO2 emissions globally are going to continue to rise.
There's another breakdown on that. What about gas and oil? I mean, where are we at with that? They've got the federal government. I've noticed that recently the price of a barrel of oil is coming down. They're talking that to help with inflation. Let's give people some hope with this thing here. There's got to be a balance, though. You can't lower prices so much that they're not going to produce. So let's talk about that balance that they have to. What is the benchmark for oil companies, hydrocarbon companies to make money? What is the number?
Well, it all depends. Where are you? What type of oil are you producing? How far are you from the pipeline? What grade of oil are you producing? Do refiners want it? There are many different issues to deal with. A barrel of oil is not a barrel of oil. You have Canadian heavy oil bitumen coming out of the Canadian tar sands. And in West Texas, you have what's considered light sweet. In Saudi Arabia, you've got Arab sour. So there are different grades of crude, and where they're going, it depends on, and where they're refined depends on the quality of the oil. So, but that's a caveat. But in general, in the United States, the benchmark at which I hear, generally oil producers are pretty comfortable is about $70 a barrel. So that in places like the Permian Basin in West Texas and New Mexico, they can be assured of a reasonable profit. Now, they're not making a killing, but they're making, they're profitable. But remember, Tom, the oil and gas industry, we don't need to plan on a second collection for them on Sunday. They're going to be okay. They have gone through, it's a boom and bust business. It's always been a boom and bust business. And, my brother Wally, who I love dearly, he and I talk about natural gas prices all the time. He's a perma bull on natural gas prices. And the price has been fluctuating a lot in recent months. The good news here is, maybe we conclude on this, but it's that for all of this talk about challenges in the U.S., and there are many challenges, the U.S. has an incredible advantage when it comes to energy availability over the rest of the world. Natural gas in the United States costs about a third of what it does in Europe and a third of what it does in Asia. And so this abundance of low-cost natural gas has been an incredible boon to the U.S. economy. And instead of demonizing the oil and gas industry, I think we should be lauding its progress, because its ability to produce all these hydrocarbons has made our economy more resilient and resulted in a better overall economic environment for everyone.
Robert Bryce, our guest today. What's our takeaway? I need a minute takeaway, and we're going to wrap this bad boy.
How about be thankful for where we are? I mean, it's incredible. The United States, we have a lot of faults in this country, and we could spend hours talking about all the challenges facing us, including bad politics, bad representation, the swamp that is Washington, D.C. But for all of these faults, the United States is still an incredibly important and leading country. Do we live up to our promise? No, of course not. We have a lot of promise that is unmet, but it's still an incredible place to live, and I don't want to move anywhere else. And we're incredibly fortunate, in particular, to have the energy and power that we have at our disposal.
Carry gratitude in your heart. Listen to Robert Bryce. Go get his Substack. It's awesome. Call this one Spain Drain. If our show fits your business or group's mission, we want to be of service to you through our topics. Let us know. Sponsorships are available. We can do that. You got to be a good fit. Always remember, before you can share love with others, you must love yourself first. Always close the show with that. Thanks again to my buddy RB, Robert Bryce, Sandy, Craig, Brock, everybody. We'll talk to you next weekend, everybody. Have a great week. Go out and ignite your life. Good day now. Tom Matt Show's production of Boomers Rock Media. We want to bring your story to life. Lastly, I want to say thank you again to Mitch Anderson and Vanessa for what they do. We are out. Robert Bryce is the bomb. Love him so much. Call this one Spain Drain. Alt Energy. Be careful with the marketing that is out there with all of this, everybody. Keep an eye on things. Keep an eye on all of it. Be more educated. We're getting scammed. We're getting scammed. Until next time, everybody, I want to thank Robert Bryce again for coming on. Spain Drain. Right on, brother. Love it. Thank you, everyone, for doing what you do, subscribing, watching, listening, all of it. I appreciate you so much. Please help our sponsors. They help us stay on the air. Until next time, peace out, everybody. I'm Tom. Papa Tom, Tom Matt Show. We'll see you next time.